now we get to hear from some really talented professionals around our great state. And to do that, we get to introduce Mr. Ken Cope, who is our moderator of this panel. He is the Senior Vice President of Real Estate Development for Den Real Estate. So Ken, I'm going to pass it to you to introduce your panel and get things started.
Thanks very much, Stacy. Really appreciate it. Thank you for everyone for tuning into this new format and joining us. It's been quite the experience thus far. I'm really excited about the panel that we have together today. Just some wonderful experts. I think we've got a great mix of both public and private sector and a lot of asset classes covered here. So very, very excited to be able to share a little bit of how business is getting done in our current environment. With us today, I'd like to introduce our panelists, and then we'll go into some round robin questions before we get a little bit more targeted in our questioning. A reminder, any of the viewers out there, if you have a certain question that you'd like answered, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen here, and you could submit questions, and we'll do our best to squeeze those in if time allows. So with us today, we've got Kelly Brough, who is the CEO of Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce, Pete Schippits with CBRE's President of Mountain-Northwest Division, Scott Prisco, the Chief Building Official with the City and County of Denver Community Planning and Development, Chad Brue from Brue Baukol Capital Partners, as well as Rick Medwedeff from the Gaylord Rockies Resort and Convention Center. So welcome to the panel, and thank you guys very much for your time today in joining. I'd like to start it off a little bit light and start things off with a good tone. So I might start with Kelly. And the question I have for each of you as you introduce yourselves is, I would love to understand in the current environment what positives you've gained from the stay-at-home order and this new way of working and living, either personally or professionally, that you might be able to take away from what we've done here. So Kelly, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Yeah, since I already cussed, I got that out of the way for everybody who's on this webinar. So Kelly Brough, President and CEO of the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce. I would say, I'm an extrovert. I get my energy from being around people. And so this is particularly hard. I saw this great meme and it said, it was an introvert and it said, I've been training my whole life for this moment. I have not. So I find this really challenging. But the upside is my youngest daughter had just come back to Denver right before this all started. And she and her best friend got put on lockdown with me. And so I really love cooking. And how I have cooked is, as the virus would enter a new country, I would cook a specialty dish from that country. We've eaten a lot of Italian. It's been really pretty good.
That's a wonderful take on it, Kelly. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going in just in the order that I originally introduced. Pete, why don't we go to you?
Yeah, I would say similar challenges as Kelly said. I do feed off people and overseeing a handful of markets, some of them newer than others. You lose that connectivity of that person-to-person contact when you can't, get into the markets and mix it up with people if you haven't established a personal relationship yet. So I would say that's on the challenging side, but I've been trying to take advantage of not having a commute home. And so when I'm signing off early, I'm jumping on my cruiser bike and riding around the neighborhood and, streets less filled with cars and trying to decompress in a way that I wasn't able to do when you're, dressed in a suit and having to leave the office and commute and you're jumping on a phone. It's a different, better way to decompress, I would say.
And a healthier way. Thanks, Pete.
Yeah, there you go.
Scott, why don't we go to you? Anything that you've gotten out of this as a positive?
Well, similar to Kelly, I'm an Italian heritage guy, and I love to cook. So I've been having a great opportunity, having some pretty amazing meals. Made some killer ricotta and potato gnocchis the other day, unbelievable. So we've been really eating very fine food lately.
Well, once this passes, Scott, I'll look forward to a sample of some of that. Chad, how about you? Anything that you've gained as a positive?
Positive, maybe not. I've decided to start cooking more and realize that I'm not a very good cook. So that's maybe positive that I've started to cook more, but I suck at it. So, and I've also, for those of you that know me, I've decided to grow a coronavirus beard that I know a lot of other people have started to do as well, which I've never had the opportunity to take, a full month and a half or 2 months to grow a beard, and it still looks like crap. So.
I was going to say that we'd reserve our opinions, but keep the valiant effort. Rick, how about yourself?
Yes, like other folks, I'm accustomed to a lot of interaction with a lot of staff members and guests throughout the resort. But I would tell you that, I usually work at the resort a minimum of 10 to 12-hour days. So my time at home is very limited. So I've been married for 38 years, and I've seen more of my wife in the last couple months or the last 45 days than I've ever seen her. And so that's been a very good positive. The other good positive is we're taking daily walks together that we've never done in the past, and obviously maintaining our social distancing from other folks, but nonetheless, walking around our neighborhood and looking at the Rocky Mountains is always inspiring to make your day better.
Rick, if we asked your wife if she thinks that this has been a great thing as well, would she answer the same way?
Yeah, I don't know that she would answer the same.
Thanks, Rick. It's always wonderful to, find something, that's as serious as the current pandemic and try to learn some things from it and try to better ourselves. It's wonderful to hear how each of you are doing that. Rick, maybe we'll stick with you and go in reverse order here for this next question, if we could. Switching more to the business standpoint, I'd love to understand, how this pandemic has affected each of you in your professional roles, either good or bad, and how it has changed. So, Rick, would you mind starting off for us?
Well, sure. Let me just kind of quickly give you a kind of a high-level overview of how this has impacted our business. Recently, our CEO, Arnie Swanson, was interviewed, and his comments in the interview was that the COVID-19 impact to our business is worse than 9/11 and the financial crisis of 2008 and 9 combined. Our business volumes are down 90% across the globe. Roughly 2,000 of our 7,500 hotels around the world are currently closed due to lack of business. If you look at the job loss, our hospitality represents probably about a third of all job losses across the spectrum. Then coming closer to home here, TSA checkpoints are down at DIA about 95%. City hotels in Denver are running around 11% occupancy. For the Gaylord Rockies, we closed our doors on March 25th. And of this past week, our owners just recently reported that all Gaylord properties are closed through the month of May. So some pretty bleak statistics of how this is impacting our business. And what I would say what we can do to mitigate this, and what I'm trying to do locally to mitigate this the best I can, given these set of circumstances, is working with our Colorado Hotel Lodging Association and our Tourism Council to really try to provide input to the governor on suggestions on how to establish guidelines for opening our business up and getting it back in business. Our priority is to get the restrictions that are currently in place to be removed in a responsible and timely way, and with a very clear message that allows us to do our business and make plans and communicate with our group and leisure customers. So that's really where my focus is right now, is we've got to get our doors open, and the only way that we can do that is to have different set of guidelines and restrictions to get people coming back to our hotel.
Thanks for sharing that, Rick. It's certainly, sobering times from a hospitality perspective, but, thank you for all that you're doing in coordinating the right way to get back open when we can. Chad, from the developer perspective at Brue Baukol, have you guys either been impacted on certain projects, or have you heard, others that you deal with that this is having a direct result on some of the projects? Obviously, you've got a project life cycle that is somewhat long, so I'm wondering if you're seeing some of those effects already or not.
Yeah, we absolutely are seeing the effects. And just as way of background for those of you that don't know us, we have about $1.2 billion worth of assets under management across the country, most of it focused in Colorado. But we have office buildings, apartment buildings. We own a movie theater. We own a golf course. We have a resort development down in Turks and Caicos. So every basic product type we have a connection to. We own a hotel in Boulder, and as Rick was talking about, we're at about 17-18% occupancy. So we feel fortunate to be that high on the occupancy level. It's an extended stay property. But we're trying to figure out when's the light going to change, and when are we going to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and how long can we weather this storm on that particular asset. Now, fortunately, we do have long-term cash reserves that'll get us through 12 to 18 months of just zero occupancy. But it makes us reevaluate our business plan. We just bought the property a year ago, and so it makes us sit down and think about we look at things in kind of three different tranches. One is if things start to churn in the next 30 to 60 days, meaning we can see the light at the end of the tunnel in the next 30 to 60 days, here's our new business plan. If it's 6 months from now before we see the light at the end of the tunnel, here's our new business plan. If it's longer than that, then it's more nuclear kind of scenario of saying, well, what do we need to do? We also own a restaurant at the Denver Diner at Spear and Colfax. We bought it as a long-term development play, but we have a tenant, and we were happy to have a tenant, and obviously not paying rent right now. So we need to consider, do we move up the timeline on the development of that site if the tenant stops paying rent, or if they decide to move out of that building? So I would just say that for us, it's really about adaptability, and it's really about trying to figure out, create the different scenarios of what the economy might do, and how are we going to respond on each of our assets based on, what the economy is going to do. And I think, an overarching theme that we continue to hear is we need to have some clarity on the coronavirus, whether it's a vaccine or some level of treatment. Once there's that clarity, then we can start to, prognosticate on where this is going to go and where the future is going to go on each of our assets.
Thanks, Chad. Scott, from the city and county of Denver and the permitting perspective, tell us a little bit about, what you have noticed and how things might have changed from your perspective.
Sure. We immediately, we've been doing a lot digitally, as everybody knows, so we accept electronic. But when this happened, we stood up everything digital, including our counter, so that you can do a same day over-the-counter review now electronically. But it takes 2 days, not 20 minutes. Not that it ever took only 20 minutes. I know you had to wait in line, but we stood everything up digitally. It was really clunky. We didn't have laptops, so I mean, some of us do, but the majority of our team has desktops. So we were carrying desktops home with large monitors. So our plan review has continued, and it got off to a couple days of a rough start, but then it was seamless. Our performance has been phenomenal. I'm so proud of our team. We're doing great work, keeping up with our backlog. In terms of our inspections, call-in inspections like you always have. We've even started putting our inspection times on windows, so it's public facing now. When you're within a 2-hour window when your inspections are. So we've actually progressed some things that we weren't going to do a little bit later on. We progressed them sooner. This actually showed us too that we're able to work from home successfully with our teams, which is really great to know. Helps us compete a little bit with the private sector in terms of being able to have that ability if we can get laptops at some point in our budgets, so that'll work. So we saw some silver lining in this. I know it's a horrible thing, but we've tried to make the best of it and to try to make the process as seamless as possible for our customers so that we have as little impact economically as possible.
And Ken, I just want to throw into for Scott's some props and kudos to Scott. As the city in Denver has been forward thinking and on the forefront of this. We have projects in other markets where we can't get a inspection scheduled. We can't have, city meetings or community meetings or even, discussions with people in the city because they don't have laptops and they don't have the ability to do things electronically in submitting and trying to get permits and whatnot. So props to Scott and the city of Denver for being on the forefront of this. And I know there were some challenges early in the process, but it seems to be moving pretty well today. So great work.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Chad. Pete, why don't we go to you? Obviously, you're speaking with a lot of people in a lot of different sectors. Tell us a little bit about what you've heard in terms of how the market is responding.
Yeah, I mean, for the first time, it's interesting. I feel like if you go back a handful of months, you had clients, and one of the main things they were trying to do is differentiate themselves, in whatever sector, and mostly that was to attract employees and such. And we've shifted in a very short amount of time to a herd mentality. We're lucky enough, to have a lot of connection with clients, and they're all considering the same factors right now, and much more open in terms of what are people doing, seeking advice. And so I think we're looking more in as a counselor at times, to provide that advice, because the markets are fairly bleak. I mean, when you look at, we don't anticipate stabilization to occur until sometime in Q3, and no rebound starting until Q4. And so, people are seeking stability. Where's the ground? A lot of discussions on that level. And the office side, there's huge disruption in the co-working space. You have very limited occupancy in most of the co-working places. There's, short-term operators are looking to, try to create solvency in that space. They're effectively retail tenants in the sense that their licensees and rent-paying tenants can't access the space, don't want to access the space, and then aren't paying, rent potentially. Office tenants, large office tenants, some are being opportunistic. I mean, if you're well capitalized and your business is stable, there are some opportunities that are coming up. So we're seeing some tenants look, in that direction, but by and large, people, are focusing more on how to re-enter their offices than they are worrying about their long-term, space needs. Retail, as, we've all talked about, I mean, there is just, huge questions surrounding, the solvency and rent paying. There was a study that came out in the food and beverage sector from the National Restaurant Association, found that 1 out of 7 restaurants have permanently closed or plan to do so within the next month. I mean, that's just brutal for all of us, for consumers, for the real estate business. I mean, you just think of your 7 favorite restaurants and, one of them's gone already. And we're fairly new into this. Our forecast for hospitality, as we've touched on, is, 46% decline in revenue per available room for all U.S. hotels this year. And obviously it hits certain sectors more than others. To go back to retail, the difference in payment of rent that we've seen this early on, I mean, it's as low as 10% in, certain malls and outlet centers, and then as high as 80% in, grocery anchored centers. And so you can't just call it retail. Strip centers, non-grocery anchored, are somewhere in the middle. So a huge separation in how this is impacting. It's impacting everybody, but it's impacting them disproportionately higher in certain areas. Multifamily and industrial, we're seeing rent ratios, payments there, and even in office at 90% and above. So from a rent payment standpoint, that's not yet, hit the radar, at least not to the extent it has with other areas, but it's important. Industrial is probably the best example from a major asset class that we're seeing, long-term stability. We had over 300 million feet in the U.S. Under development when at the end of last year, kind of when this hit. A third of it was pre-leased, and now, while the majority of it is still under construction, there's significant delays, due to whether it's inspections or just construction delays and stuff. And so, we're going to see vacancy go up as this starts to deliver, because you're not seeing the same leasing levels, but there will be pent up demand. E-commerce is very active, as we all know. So we see industrial stabilizing fairly quickly. By next year, we see actually that being at some point next year back to pre-crisis levels. And then multifamily, same thing in the sense that it's an asset class that's impacted less so than others, but financing for multifamily is still available. The volume of those trades are significantly down, but some of those deals are still happening. So it's one of the more active areas. But, as far as the capital markets side of any of these asset classes, the real frustration comes down to you can't do property tours, you can't do due diligence. And so even if you identify an asset you want, you have a willing buyer, willing seller, you can't get through the actual process right now. So we're still looking for stable ground to retrench and kind of re-kick the transactional side of our business off.
And Pete, I know, Kelly, you're probably going to speak on this too, but Pete, how do you compare Colorado to the other markets that you oversee and the other markets and in the CBRE network? How does Colorado and how's Denver going to fare, in your opinion, through this?
I think we're a mixed bag openly. I mean, we certainly have exposure in some of those sectors, tourism, energy, that are being hit harder than others, but we are so much more diversified. The emerging tech, sector, that's essentially the same size, not quite, but close to the same size of like our downtown from an office space standpoint as the energy sector is now, and so we are benefiting from a lot of the good work that Kelly and the rest of just the community has done over the last couple decades in diversifying the economy. So we're much better off than we would have been, but we're going to feel it. We're not going to escape this. I don't say, like, if you rank the top couple of cities, I don't think we're there, but we're certainly not in the bottom handful either. I would put us kind of smack in the middle.
I'd like to get some of Kelly's thoughts, but I want to follow up with you something there, Pete, in terms of, you mentioned industrial being one of the asset classes that will weather this a little bit better. Are there certain subsectors, one might think logistics, might get a little kick in the pants from what's going on here? Are there things that you're seeing, that it might be advantageous to?
It will hit different components of the overall industrial logistics sector, differently, but you've got declines in transportation volume, right? But you've got a shift in retail. You've got the potential transition of what would have been traditionally retail assets into now more like distribution last mile assets. You almost have a conversion of asset types in some cases from retail into industrial. So too early to tell exactly which sector is going to be hit, but when you look at what has been refilling certain components of, call it big box retail, have been areas that right now we can't, trampoline parks and things like that aren't viable. And so the industry as a whole is trying to decide what is this crisis going to do, what is it going to allow for in terms of the types of businesses that can backfill what we have. And to pigeon back to where you started is, e-commerce is a staple. No one thinks that, we're going to see a decline in e-commerce after this. This just accelerated the trend that we were already on, pouring gasoline on that fire. And so that specific component is going to, be much more active. Cold storage, for example, I mean, there's a significant shortage in that compared to what we see the future of the industrial business. So I think that's an area that we're going to see significant growth. So yeah, there's many more bright spots within the overall industrial asset class than we have in most others in terms of opportunities.
Sure. Thanks, Pete. Kelly, I'd love to hear a little bit about what the Chamber is doing during this difficult time, how you're working, with the other governmental entities to still bring business to Denver. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and what you plan for the future.
Yeah, as you can imagine, 6 weeks ago, it sort of was crisis, still is. We have about 3,000 members and about 90% of those are small business. And small business definitely is being hit very, very hard right now. So we kind of had two goals. The first goal was, can we keep the employer viable and help them make payroll? Because we knew if we could do that, we would actually stem our second goal and make it easier to accomplish. And that is, for people who lost their job, how quick can we hold them and connect them to an opportunity? And so I'm going to give you a little insight into kind of the macro economy. Pete was touching on it very well. So we had about over 42,000 employers receive payroll protection or paycheck protection $7.4 billion we brought home in that first round. We have that second round to also serve our companies. This is really important in terms of that first goal, because if you can't work, you're probably not bringing in revenue, and the only way to buy a little time is if we can get you that paycheck protection. And so that has been kind of our priority and our focus, and we've had some success. We also have then focused on unemployment, where you have seen the numbers significantly larger. I think in the past 4 weeks, we've had 279,000 people file for unemployment. Just to give you context, in all of 2009, the year I took this job, we had 285,000 people file for unemployment. So this is a massive, short period of time and huge numbers. But now let me give you a little more context. Our unemployment is about 4.5%. And so when you consider that, what you realize is we can manage this. We can connect people back to jobs. We can find ways, and I think this is the moment we get a chance to show the efficiency of public and private working together and really helping connect workers, because we are a tale of two economies today. We have industries that are growing and hiring and frankly able to be very productive even during a time like this. And we have industries, some of whom you've heard from today, who are devastated at a time like this. And that can be a positive, because it means you can connect those workers and help them not have devastating consequences from the loss of that initial job. I was with a reporter recently, and they said, golly, how does it feel? You were the #1 economy in the nation 3 years running. How does it feel now? And I said, hey, for all I know, we still are the #1 economy in the nation, right? Like, have context here that everybody's in trouble. And I agree with Pete. I think in Colorado, we're navigating it a little better, and the diversity of our economy helps us, because if some of our employers continue to hire and grow and bring in revenue, that means devastating. And in 2009, it was much broader in terms of the impact. The other thing we pay close attention to is the testing and the vaccinations and the speed at which that can come online. Frankly, for Rick, this is probably just critical to get his operation and the vision of what he would like to see out at Gaylord. I thought the fantastic news in the last 48 hours was we could actually have a vaccine as early as September. That is unbelievable. And they are skipping testing on animals and going straight to testing on people. That vaccination is really probably critical, because not only are our companies struggling as we allow them to go back to work, they have employees who can't go back because their kids have nowhere to go. And so that vaccination really can ramp up our ability to ensure our employees and customers are safe. And then the last thing I'd say is we still have a big pipeline of people interested in Colorado. For a lot of reasons, including, that workforce we have here is amazing. And it didn't change with COVID. We have the second person in Massachusetts. So you guys know we're really #1 in terms of our workforce, but the second most educated workforce in the nation. And that matters still to companies. And so we continue to see companies interested in Colorado, and we're submitting proposals and working with potential transition of both office and headquarters.
Thanks for sharing that, Kelly. I think it's, certainly interesting to hear, both your and Pete's thoughts on, how we will compare to, other cities and states as we wade through this. Scott, I'd love to hear from you a little bit, focusing more locally on, what effect you've seen specifically to permitting and projects coming in. Have you seen any variance from, before everything hit, and how so?
Yeah, so we're in the process of a code change, and because of that, potentially people, and that would have been normally April 30th would have been the effective date. And so we would see typically a trend of more submittals coming in, but the more submittals coming in is pretty high. Where some weeks we're like 50% higher valuation year over year, when we had a a $5.2 billion permitted year last year in terms of valuation. So that's pretty crazy to still see those come in. We're also looking at like about a 12% increase in logged in projects, which is big. And now we're down in permits, number of permits, because one, our throughput, we're not getting as much reviewed, partly because of the dip that we had in the transition getting to home. Our fire group is a little bit behind because they're understaffed, but that's getting worked out. And there's a reduction in our single family and duplex projects. So you can imagine those sort of have dropped off at least by about 14%. But that also means that the commercial numbers that I'm saying are higher than what I'm stating, because that's making up for the reduction in residential. So commercial's way up for us. It's not to say everybody's going to pull those permits once the plan reviews are approved because of the financial concern of maybe the folks are putting it on hold temporarily or permanently having trouble getting financing, depending on the industry. So we're seeing a lot more than you would ever anticipate, which is great news. I think we have in Denver, we were fortunate. We had a rock solid foundation for our economy, like was mentioned. I mean, it's incredible the amount of work in terms of the construction industry and the backlog that we have. And we're still seeing site development plans coming in. So it's not like there's like this complete dive in what we would see. It's the opposite for us, partly due to our code effective date.
And Scott, as you and I talked about on the prep call for this the other day, and it's speculation on my part, but from a commercial developer standpoint, it takes 6 to 12 months to prepare something to submit to the city. And so anything that we would have submitted, say in April, we would have been working on 6 or 12 months ago. And I don't think we would have pushed pause. And I think maybe that's why you're seeing the decrease on the residential side, is because it is a shorter window from preparation to submittal. I'm not disagreeing with your stats, and I think that's awesome that we're continuing to see submittals come into the city. I just am curious as to how many are developers that say, well, we're on the 1 yard line, let's go ahead and kick it in, but are we going to pick up the permit, and are we going to start construction? That's going to be the telling numbers, and we just won't know until time passes. So
a great point. I agree 100%.
Well, Chad, to that point, let's get a little bit more granular as to projects. I'm going to pick on you first. Obviously you guys have the project out by Den there, about a 130-acre mixed-use project that you're working on. Tell us a little bit about that, just as an overview for those that might not be familiar. And then if you could tell us, has this changed any of the planning specific to that project?
So it's 130 acres between 61st and 64th, just east of Tower Road, all in the city and county of Denver. None of it's in Aurora. We're the master developer, and so we've been putting in all the infrastructure, the horizontal infrastructure, and selling off kind of finished lots. We had sold a smaller parcel to a self-storage group that is under construction right now. We've sold some land to Lennar, and they're building single-family, attached single-family, and some multifamily. So anything that was, kind of ongoing up until, call it April 1st, is continuing to move forward without any major hiccups. Now, we're not inside of what those companies, and if those companies are deciding whether or not they're going to push pause, but nothing has really changed from that standpoint. We did have some other parcels that are under contract to some buyers. And not just on this parcel, but on other parcels that we own across the country or across Colorado, there's just been this hesitancy to close right now. So people are coming to us and say, can we have a 30-day extension or a 60-day extension? They're not saying, we want out. They're not asking for a price reduction, at least not yet. They're just saying, things are different today than they were 2 months ago. And so let's just push pause. Sometimes it's the equity that is saying, we want to get more clarity. Sometimes it's the debt. In fact, on one of the parcels here at the Standard at Gateway, one of the buyers that we have, he's got his construction financing lined up, but his land partner, which I'm not sure if it was debt or equity, but his land partner just said, stop, let's push pause. But his construction financing was ready to go. So he wants to keep going forward. But, for one reason or another, we've had a lot of our properties that we've had under contract for sale that have, the buyers have just come to us and said, hey, we're pushing pause for 30 or 60 days. And as a seller, in any other given market, I've been in this industry now for 22 years, we would probably need a really valid reason to give somebody an extension. And I would say today's environment is a very valid reason. We understand where they're coming from. And by putting the pressure on them to say, hey, we're not going to give you an extension, we need you to close, it's not going to fly. So we've been pretty accommodating with our buyers and letting them have those extensions, but we're not going to be accommodating forever. I mean, there's going to become a point where we say, you need to, blank or get off the pot. I'll use one of Kelly's words from earlier, but I won't say it.
You want me just to say it for you?
Yeah, please. So anyway, I think at Gateway, the land that we have out there by the airport, we're very excited to be next to Rick's project at Gaylord. It will come back. The Gaylord's not going anywhere. It is going to be a successful project in the future, and we're excited to have land next to it. From going into and coming out of a recession, we love building more affordable and workforce and obtainable housing in markets like that, because there seems to be an increase in demand in that kind of a product coming out of a recession. So I think we're still very bullish on the market in the area. It's just there's going to be a short window here of just everybody kind of pushing pause.
Thanks for sharing that, Chad. Let's turn to your neighbor, Rick. You let us in on a little bit of what the Gaylord is doing right now, obviously, and we're all hopeful that, things can return to normal sooner rather than later for you. Obviously, you guys had some aggressive expansion plans as well. Tell us a little bit how those have been impacted. Is it a pause? Is it a stop? Can you tell us anything there?
Yeah, I would tell you it's a pause. We know that the plans are still intact to expand our property, 317 guest rooms. So that will take us over 1,800 rooms when we're all said and done. The fact is that even during our shutdown, there's been some pre-work done in order to connect where the new building will be to the existing building. So we're connecting or setting up the utilities for that connection. So that's a prime indicator that this project will in fact unfold. The date of the actual construction in mass was supposed to be April of this month, but obviously that has been put on pause. Our owners are looking at a variety of different criteria as to when to determine to reestablish the full construction start date, which is about a 2-year build out. So we don't have a specific date for that yet, but I would anticipate getting clear direction on that within the next quarter.
Rick, obviously your business is very convention center oriented, and conventions have come to just a screeching halt. When do you think, outside of the overall economy recovering, when do you think the convention business, because people have to plan, as you well know, a year or 2 years out in advance, when do you see that business recovering? Is it the same time as the rest of the economy, or is there a delay, or any thoughts on that?
Well, sure. So as you mentioned, 80% of our business is convention business. So the good news is, for a property of our size, we do very large conventions. And because of that, groups have to plan those type of events well in advance. So we have groups that are booked through the year 2028 because of the size and complexity. They need to secure the space over the dates that they need to hold these events. So we have a significant group base for 21, for the next 8 years already on the books. The good news for us is, if we want to look at where, this year, obviously, we went into the year with an amazing amount of groups already on the books. Unfortunately, we've had a significant amount of cancellations, and those are still unfolding as we speak. But the good news is that we've been very successful in rebooking these cancellations. So whether it's looking at postponing the meeting to the fourth quarter of this year or into 21 and beyond, we've in fact, of the groups that we have rebooked, which represents about 20% of the cancellations that we've incurred to date, 50% of those that we've been able to rebook are falling within the next 12 to 18 months. So we already have a good base on the books for 21. And now with the cancellations that are shifting some of the groups that were going to be here this year into next year, it's building upon that. So I would tell you that, this year is obviously going to be a challenge We're going to be looking at a slow ramp up, and to the extent that people get comfortable with traveling and meeting in larger size gatherings, that's going to dictate the ramp up of this. But we do have a substantial amount of business on the books in our fourth quarter, and we've had active conversations with meeting planners. And although right now there's always the uncertainty of whether or not, unless things get worse, we think that these meetings will occur. They may occur with a lesser attendance, which is in some cases how it will unfold. But that's the current picture for the Gaylord Rockies.
Rick, you've been in the hospitality industry for a while. I assume this is somewhat uncharted territory. Is there anything specific that you guys are seeing as a change to how you do business as a result?
Yes, absolutely. Right now, on the short-term side of this, because of the complexity and size of our operation, we have a lot of fixed costs. So that was the decision to keep the building closed due to that fixed cost. But for the longer term, we're working right now on developing new protocols and procedures for cleaning, sanitizing, social distancing within our meeting space, within our food and beverage operations, so that our convention and leisure business feels safe having their meetings and events and or vacationing at our resorts. So for example, we're working with providing groups a lower density of spacing within their meeting space so they can still conduct their meeting, but have the effective distancing for their attendees. We're also looking at being kind of creative in that some of these attendees will feel comfortable coming to the property. Others may not. So we're developing hybrid virtual meetings where part of the group is at the property, and for those that don't feel safe or cannot travel because of whatever reasons, can be part of that event by through virtual means. And so we're really developing some hybrid type of scenarios for groups to have that capability of still meeting and having their meetings. Because a lot of our groups are associations, and associations, that's their driving revenue, and they have to meet. So they got to find ways, creative ways to get their exhibitors involved and their attendees involved. And so we're looking at those type of variations.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it. Pete, I'd like to ask you a similar question, in that, with the different industry sectors that you touch, are you hearing from anyone a change of how business is done in certain sectors? For instance, creative office, co-working, is this a boon or a death dagger? Any other sectors that you're seeing that may have to change the way they do things?
Yeah, as it relates to co-working, I think it's both. It will probably be the death dagger for some, that just aren't as well capitalized and can't sit out this, time period now when people are not likely going to be as comfortable going into, especially the more open and shared environments that some of them were focusing on. You're still going to see some niche groups that had a very strong backing by their members that will thrive in this environment. And then you're going to see larger, more well-capitalized groups that I think will also thrive because the need is still there. I think this situation that we're in highlights a need for, shorter, more temporary, or even just less lease term remaining space for groups, and more flexible space where they can scale up and scale down more quickly. But I think it's going to change, in terms of the cleaning requirements and the distancing requirements and the ability to, lock off individual spaces, I think will be highlighted in those co-working spaces. But that's here to stay. It's just going to look different, and the players are going to look different, I think, as this emerges. I mean, we are still doubling down. We've got a product, HANA is what it's called. CBRE owns it, and it's full steam ahead on that. We believe in it heavily, and it's because we talk to our clients, and our clients still say this is something they need and want. But everyone's going through that transitionary time of what will this type of pandemic do to my operation? And you have that in retail in terms of how you create flow and social distancing and such. You have it in office spaces when we're all weighing different governmental orders, as to what's allowed in one place versus another. And companies have to weigh that. If they're a national or global operation, they have to first look at the ground and decide and see what is open and available in that location and kind of build their plan backwards from that. And then you can move into the physical office space and decide, per a CDC requirement, do you do a clockwise or counterclockwise movement? Do you have, based on your layout of benching seats and such, can you distance yourself? A lot of speculations going into, because we're all so effectively working from home, do we have less of a need for office space? And I think on the other side of that, you're seeing a movement of, we actually need to de-densify the office space that we have and not maybe put people in so close together. What used to be a conference room that sat 20 will maybe now be a conference room that seats 10. And so there's actually more office space required for those. Is hoteling a better use? Because people who are hoteling or shared work space environments, we are that way at CBRE for new offices, and we already have hand sanitizer and sanitary wipes and such in our, every single seat. And those people are used to cleaning, that space every day when they move in, because it's not their normal space. And so all these considerations are going in. Too early to tell what will, take hold as the next new thing, but everyone is reevaluating their business and how it can operate more effectively in this type of environment, because we don't know how long this type of environment is going to last. And so it's a survival mechanism. You've got to get to the other side, whatever that is. And some groups are doing that actually and thriving in the environment right now. So,
yeah. No, thank you, Pete. It'll be interesting to see how it evolves. As a society, it seemed like we had a lot of momentum toward community building, right? And whether it's from an office perspective, with co-working, creative office space, food halls, whatever it is, there was a push that way, right? And so it'll be interesting to see coming out the other side if that's been affected or not. One of the other things that I'm interested to see if it becomes a result, and I might turn to you, Chad, is, from the single family home or multifamily perspective, there was certainly a trend towards urbanism, towards living in downtown areas throughout the U.S. Does this change at all after this? Do people seek more space because of it, and we start seeing more attraction towards suburbias?
Yeah, I think, and there's no question that there's going to be shifts in how people think and how people want to live and how people want to work. So I think, it's too early to tell. Is it going to be a massive shift to suburbia? Probably not. But is there going to be a component of our population that doesn't want to live in a 400 unit or a 400 square foot unit project in downtown Denver, where their only kind of outside space is to leave their unit, versus somebody wanting to be in suburbia and have a backyard and have a front yard? And so I think there will be a component of our population that wants to move out to the suburbs and want to have more space around them to recreate and, be close to a park instead of having to, take a 16th Street mall shuttle, down to get to a park. I mean, that's, just that alone is how many people are going to hop on a 16th Street mall shuttle in the future. I mean, I think everything we do from the moment we wake up until the moment we go to bed, we're all going to be thinking a little differently than we were 2 months ago. Some of us are going to adapt very easily. I'm at an age and I don't have any health issues that I'm less concerned about my health, but my parents at mid 70s have more concerns and are going to be less willing to go to restaurants, or less willing to go to to a movie theater or go to a giant football game. And so I think every aspect of our lives need to be reevaluated. And I think, to your question, yeah, there is going to be a component of our population that says, I'd rather have a backyard in my own space and not share an elevator with somebody all day, with different people all day, every day. And so I think, it'd be foolish, I think, to think that we're going to eventually get back to normal. we will get back to some level of normalcy, but it's a gigantic paradigm shift. We're going to do things a little differently in the future. And I look at like September 11th during the World Trade Center attack. Things are different, and now we accept it. We go through at the airport, we go through security. It takes a heck of a lot longer than it did before September 11th, but we've adapted and we adjusted to it. So I think going forward, we're going to adapt and adjust to the new world, and it's going to be different than what it was 2 months ago.
Thanks, Chad. It is time to ask each of you to put on your hat and your crystal ball and tell us a little bit about how you foresee things 12 to 18 months from now. I might start with Kelly, if I could. From your perspective, what do you see as a return in that time frame?
Yeah. Well, I will be honest. I think this moment, as we start to reintroduce ourselves into our workplace, is just critical for if by Q4 of this year, we're starting to feel like we're coming out of this thing. Because if we screw this up, if we go too fast, if we increase the spread of the virus, we will have a longer shutdown and it will be much worse. And so, the thing I really am emphasizing is be smart, go slow, get this right, guys, because that will mean we'll come out sooner and stronger and better. So it's hard for me to predict. I'm going to say we're going to follow good rules. We're going to be super smart. We're going to wash our hands a lot. And this is going to be a good time for Colorado to prove we're capable of thinking carefully about how to do this and do it safely. And I think our teams are going to really help us get that right. But I also, I think we're changing how we do business. And so, I imagine I'm in that category of, yeah, sure, you can work home from one day a week. And I thought that was quite innovative. And, in 24 hours, my team was not only 100% working at home, but we were delivering webinars to thousands and thousands of our members overnight and brilliantly. And so I say this because I think you're going to see us start to work differently, and that's going to improve our chance for recovery. I think you're going to see telemedicine, which has sort of been a slow trickle. I think you're about to see it take off. So I think it triggered some things that actually increased. So I'm going to say, by 2021, the lights at the end of the tunnel, we see it coming, and we're going to be one of the first ones in the country to get there.
Thanks, Kelly. Scott, beside all city and county employees working from home from now on, what else do you see as any changes to what you do?
Well, good news is last night, council unanimously passed an amendment to our code. So we've extended our effective date, which would have been April 30th. Now will be July 31st of 2020. So projects so if they hit the pause button, they don't have to panic that they have to redesign under a new code. We can let them come in the door a little bit later under that same set of drawings. We've also extended a period of time when if it's a really large project, we were letting you go till July 31st. That now can go till December 31st. And another big thing is that we were only allowing 180 days. You had to start your project within 180 days of the effective date, which would have been 180 days from April 30th. Now it's going to be 365 days from July 31st. So next year, you have until next year to start break ground on your project. Even if you pick up a permit now or in the fall, you can wait if your project's been put on hold. So I think that gives a lot of opportunity for people not to have to spend a lot of architectural engineering fees to change documents just because of code cycle change under this terrible time. So I do believe that should be a very positive benefit for those that are on the edge, or it'll help hopefully boost the economy along a little bit more than it would otherwise if we had those restrictions.
Yeah, that's wonderful that you guys are making those efforts to keep the development community going strong. Rick, anything from your side in terms of, when you see a return to normalcy? Obviously, things are bleak at the moment. Have you guys made any projections on when you think, it's business as close to normal as it can be anyway? You're muted right now, Rick.
Yes. So we're probably looking sometime next year. It's going to take us through the end of this year to get people comfortable with traveling, and in particular the group customer. I think we'll see some level of activity from our leisure customers that will want to take advantage of this summer when restrictions are removed and come out and staycation. That's one of the things that are anticipated, is that individual travelers may not want to get on a plane and go and vacation somewhere, but they may want to get in their car and drive to something that's a closer proximity and still provides them the amenities of a resort to enjoy during the summer months and to get out and about. But given the fact that that only represents about 20% of our business, the bulk of our business is convention business. And to the point where, by design, our hotels is large group activity. And until gatherings can get together en masse and feel comfortable and safe, we think that that's going to drag out until next year. So the good news is that we've got a lot of activity, or like I said earlier, on the books. We're postured quite well for that. For those groups that are still kind of in the undecided state, we're going to hopefully benefit from the fact that if they make the decision to cancel or reduce the size of their group, that possibly they will leverage that and have them rebook in a future year. One of the key things that we have been trying to establish, because for future groups that are scheduled for later in the year, where force majeure contracts are questionable because they're in the future, our posture has been to try to work on a case by case with each of them to maintain that long-term relationship, because that's what we're in it for. I mean, a big part of our business model is long-term planning because of the nature of our business. And so to the extent that we can continue developing those relationships with these meeting planners and being flexible with those terms, that's our game plan. But it's going to take a full year for us to start to see more normalization.
Thanks, Rick. Pete, we've got time for one last question, and you get the honor. It actually comes from the audience, and that question is, what you see as buying opportunities coming out of this. Is there anything that you're seeing as a buying opportunity for those that are looking to get things on the cheap?
Well, as Chad will tell you, everything's for sale. So there's plenty of buying opportunities. I think you're going to see some shifts in industry trends, like we just talked about with retail, and retail will not go away. Everyone has thought it would, and slowly but surely, new creative ideas. People like to congregate, they like to experience things, and Amazon can't sell you everything. So there will certainly be opportunities there. Same thing with hotels. We are quick to forget when it's convenient, and we will be back out and engaging in the community. That being said, the commercial real estate market does tend to lag the overall economy a little bit. The recovery tends to. And so the one point I will make, and I was actually talking about this with Chad's partner the other day, is this cycle has been exceptionally fast. Our downfall has been, not running down a mountain. We fell into an elevator shaft. And what I think that's going to do is it's going to condense the distressed properties, and what normally would have taken maybe 12 to 18 months to surface might now surface a lot faster. So I actually think we're going to start seeing some distressed opportunities. I think we will find bottom of this trough faster than we normally would have. And that's actually the beginning of the recovery. So the positive side of it is we're going to find the bottom a lot quicker. We may not like where it is, but we're going to find it faster than we normally would.
I think Pete, I love you and I respect you to death, but I just want to disagree there. I think the bottom might take a little bit longer just because the amount of government money being thrown at the banks and at real estate and at businesses. So I think there's potentially another 3 to 6 month gap there where people are being bailed out by their own lenders before we see that.
There's 1 out of 7 restaurants already available for you, Chad. 1 out of 7 are already there.
I don't want the restaurant. I want the real estate. So
Right.
real estate's not in distress yet.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Chad. I really want to thank you all for your time. It's been a wonderful. I really want to thank you all for your time. It's been a wonderful panel. I think you've given a lot of insight to our viewers here, so I appreciate that. Obviously, remind everybody that we're going to be back in a few minutes for an announcement of the winners. And with that, thanks for everybody for viewing. I'll turn it over to you, Stacy.
And thank you so much, Mr. Moderator Extraordinaire. Everybody's going to give you a round of applause. I know you can't hear it. That's the only unfortunate
Yeah,
thing
the
about
applause isn't the same when it's not a live event, is it?
it is. So there we go. Golf clap. Again, panelists, thank you so much. We cannot thank you enough for the investment of your time and thoughts that you shared with all of our audience here today. So thank you for adding some robust content to our day and to our Rocky Mountain Real Estate Challenge 2020 program. So thank you again.